we have different targets for different places within the system which the storage connects. So we have a target for transmission connected storage, distribution system connected storage, and customer side storage. Um, Acknowledging that this is a new space, I felt it was important to set clear targets, but also be flexible in terms of compliance. And so since there is a requirement that this storage be viable and cost effective, if our utilities don't see bids that meet those standards, they're allowed to defer up to 80% of the target to the next period. They're also allowed to do some shifting between the target categories because we really want to see the storage develop where it makes most sense now on the grid. And then finally, I'll just note that we also allow different ownership models for the storage. Overall, with a target, no more than 50% can be utility owned, but there within a particular category, more can be. And the idea again was to make sure we had third-party participation and competition.
Right, thank you very much. That's very useful. We've been discussing here the process of having targets and whether it would be a good idea. And to sum up, I think that the industry felt that having a target was useful, but it was difficult to see that the government or regulator would accept that if it wasn't written down in policy. So for you, what was the winning argument that persuaded you to set a storage target?
Because of our interest in clean generation, California has an aggressive plan to promote renewable energy. As a state, back in 2005, we adopted what was called the Energy Action Plan. I think the original was 2002, the Energy Action Plan, which set a loading order for how we should be preferring resources in this state. And so top of that loading order is energy efficiency, then demand response, then renewables, and then cleaner fossil generation. And so in order to support our renewables development, we have a 33% RPS and by 2020, renewable portfolio standard. And we're well on our way towards that. We're at over 20% now. And as we're seeing a successful development of renewable energy, we've especially seen a growth in solar and intermittent resources. And as we're seeing those intermittent resources come online, we're starting to look at whether we're going to have some challenges in terms of meeting we're going to have some challenges with oversupply of renewables. And so the desire to keep moving forward with renewables, but also do that in an economic way and deal with some of the intermittent generation issues as well as the oversupply of renewables, storage is viewed as a tool that can help with that. Storage devices can, as you all know, store that power at times when it's less valuable and move it to better value times. So I think number one, our commitment to renewable generation and then the need to address problems associated with that was a driver. Two, our commitment to greenhouse gases broadly, because we know we can firm renewables with natural gas. We also want to use demand response, but storage is viewed as a way in which we can help firm the renewables but not add additional emissions to the system. So that was another driver. And then finally, I'll say, I think the requirement that it be cost effective and viable was important for bringing those to the table who appreciate storage but just thought the time was not now. And then finally, I'll add, we allow the utilities to come up with cost effectiveness methodology. We have to also run the results of the solicitations through these other models. But the idea was, let's bring the utility in, let's have them identify where they need storage and start from there.
Just to expand on this, you've said several times that you've been looking for cost-effective storage. So if it's going to be cost-effective and the utility could have justified it, why is it necessary to make a mandate?
We have seen some storage develop, and we would have continued to see some, but not at this scale as I believe we need to have market transformation. So, for example, some of our smaller utilities, I talked about, we've got the three big investor-owned, but then there's smaller utilities that have invested in small amounts of storage, a couple megawatts, in order to balance their smaller system. So we've seen that. The state has invested through research and development funding into demonstration projects for storage. And we've seen the development of customer-side storage because we have an incentive program for small generation that does support small customer-side storage. However, without having a utility buyer and real PPAs and contracts, I do not think that the market would take off as quickly as we need it to be. People have been talking about with permitting, with developing the rules, that it's going to take 5 to 7 years to really get things going. And as we look at where our intermittency problem will arise, we're starting to look at 2020. And so I think that's the other persuasive argument, that if we want something for 2020, we had to start now.
Just building on this question of having a target and then having cost effectiveness, do you think that you will see lower costs for storage from developers, or will there just be market skimming with higher prices?
Well, what I'm hoping, first of all, that we just get some type of price transparency. Although we've looked at cost-effective methodologies, the problem has been there's not many operational storage projects. So there are a lot of assumptions embedded in these models. And what I expect over time is that the methodologies will improve as they're calibrated with real data. And I think we'll have a better sense of both some of the costs and the benefits. In terms of what I expect that we may see in prices or competition, I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have a way in which there could be multiple ownership models, so that you do have third parties coming in, but you also have the utility being able to build storage, and seeing how those different business models work. Key will be having a number of projects come to us, and I think we have a lot of interested vendors. I would guess that those with deeper balance sheets might be better positioned up front, since they'll have easier time with the financing and maybe be able to bear some of the technology risk. Because I think as we figure out some of these risks, or understanding if they're real, technology risk, financing risk, costs may be higher up front. But I do expect over time the cost to go down. I also note that different storage technologies have different costs. And so we may see initially only certain types of procurement happening in certain duration periods, certain technologies, but over time, more and more technologies should be entering that space. I also wanted to note, Anthony, that a key part of our decision, I believe, is that within 3 years we have a review to really see where we are, because we're going to be learning over these next couple of years. After our first solicitation, we'll have actual review of how we did the solicitation to see if there's anything that can be changed, and then a whole look at our policy direction in a few years. And that's an opportunity for us to make alterations to the program, as well as consider expanding the target if it seems appropriate.
Can I just go into a little bit of detail on how the program is working then? So there could be a number of options. So a utility company, so I suppose you mean people like PG&E or SCE or San Diego Gas and Electric. They may go out
and transmission and distribution and some generation.
Okay, so they may just go out and buy some form of storage device as an asset, and that's permissible. Is that correct?
Yes, or they could contract. They most likely will get PPAs with developers for it.
Okay, so you are expecting third-party companies who may be a technology provider, or they may just be a service company?
Yeah, my guess is that'll be the majority.
Right. Well, that's interesting. So they're then taking a risk on investment with the capital against a PPA or some other form of agreement for selling the output from that plant.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So what guarantees do they have going forward? Are these long-term PPAs or relatively short duration?
So we don't put a requirement on the PPA length. I mean, we do say that in terms of counting for the target, we want to make sure that these are projects that are not just demonstration projects, so that they have at least a year of operational experience if they were in the demonstration category. But to get to I think this will help answer your question about where we are in the process. So we adopted the decision this fall, and a part of the decision requires the utilities to create a solicitation plan, which comes to us in a form of we call it an application. And this plan will lay out the types of products that they're looking to procure in the first procurement period, some specifics on some of the duration that they're looking for these storage projects. In terms of the actual, and that application is public, and so parties can comment on it. And then when it comes they'll do the solicitation. They're working on kind of standard PPAs, but I don't know what the terms of that will be.
Has there been any political or public opposition to this program?
I would say there's been political and at times public caution. My sense is that there's a general appreciation that storage would be a good thing to have. When I talk about it to people, I say this is amazing that we've got this industry that delivers such an essential product and we don't have a means to store it. Very few products that we use in society do we not have a means to store. And so there's an appreciation for storage. There's a desire for it. But there is a concern about affordability and timing. And but I think that those of us who are looking at the entire system that we're trying to move towards want to see storage as a part of the mix. And so I think people will be watching to see what happens over the next couple of years to see if we should be requiring more. One of our big investor-owned utilities, Southern California Edison, was required under that planning process to try to get 50 megawatts of energy storage. And that's the first solicitation that we're going to see even before our target solicitations start end of this year for a significant amount of storage. And I'm happy to report that Edison has received bids for their solicitation. They're evaluating them now, but they received 500 bids for these 50 megawatts. And so that's a substantial number of bids. It really shows a interest from the business community and the storage community to play in this space. And so I am cautiously optimistic, although we'll have a better sense of how viable those bids are over the next few months.
Okay. One of the points that we sometimes make about having a home market for storage in the United Kingdom is to give opportunity to British developers. I wonder if there's any priority given to manufacturers or developers from California in your program?
No, not explicitly in the decision or the statute.
All right. So it's a very open and very fair marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I'd like to see developers from California, but we're so that's I'm glad that we're seeing some of the space, but all welcome.
I think I can see half a dozen smiles from here from British developers who might want to be on the next plane out to California. Okay.